I think the biggest misconception is that the culture can't be changed or can't be formed. They just don't do anything to impact culture because they feel it's either too hard to change or it is the way it is. If an organization does not have a detailed plan written down about how they're going to deliver service and achieve service, then service delivery is not important to them.
You're listening to Signal, the podcast for attraction leaders shaping the future of guest experiences. This is Signal.
It's time to crank up our cultural IQ because today we're joined by none other than Shaun McKeogh, a guy whose name is basically a cheat code for how to fix guest experience, culture, and leadership when your staff flips faster than a roller coaster. If you've been to IAP in the last decade, chances are you've witnessed Shaun in his natural habitat, leading workshops, mentoring rising stars, and crafting training systems that actually stick, even in the chaos of our industry. Shaun's story started in the front lines of Australia's mega parks, but let's be real, he didn't stop there. He's been at the launchpad for Ferrari World Abu Dhabi and steered operations at King Power Mahanakorn in Bangkok. Here's what set Shaun apart. While most folks cross their fingers and hope culture just happens, Shaun's out there with blueprints and scaffolding, literally architecting the stuff everyone else dreams about. These days, he's a ringleader at Attractions Academy, tackling the question our industry loves to ignore. How do you build a culture that lasts when half your team is gone every 6 months? Shaun's magic trick isn't about tech, rides, or trendy acronyms. It's about systems that make the frontline staff deliver real, memorable guest experiences year after year, no matter how wild the staff turnover gets. Shaun, welcome to Signal.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, John.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you here.
I'm excited too.
And Tim, you did a great job, minus the Abu Dhabi. And to be fair, Abu Dhabi is one of those things that sounds like you're saying it wrong when you're saying it right.
Right.
Yeah,
But
good.
if I re-record that and Jerry splices it in, no one will know and they'll have no reference for what you just
I
said,
like
but-
it. I
So-
like it. Just leave it the way it is.
I like it. Yeah, I like it. So we were doing this recording earlier, and I started this way to say, don't worry about what you say here, because the reality is that we have an grade A expert editor. And at the beginning of our first podcast in episode 1, I was watching it through. I'm like, this is great. I mean, Tim, she's cutting him perfectly. We're going to get to me. I'm going to have no cuts. It's going to be great. And then it was like every word was a new cut. I'm not even sure I said what she has me saying because it was so many cuts. But anyways, we seem really professional. So everything you say here, we probably won't cut you at all, but us, we'll cut lots. We'll go from there. So how we like to start these things is to break them into kind of sections. And so to have a little bit of method to the madness, we start off with what we call part 1. And listen, from clown to consultant origins, there's obviously a history there. And so instead of asking, well, no, maybe I will ask this question. Shaun, you've worn many hats in the industry, even literally as a clown early in your career. How did you get here and end up in training?
Oh my God. I don't know where you got this background information, but yeah, I was a clown in my career. Where did you get this information? Oh my God. Actually, many, many years ago, I was in the Moomba Clown Club. And Moomba is a Melbourne festival in Australia, and it's been going on for many, many years. And they had a professional clown club, and I joined it because I wanted to be a clown. And I developed my own costume, my own name for my clown and my own look. And I spent 12 months in training in these classes going every weekend to the Moomba Clown Club. I suppose the big thing that we aimed for was the parade that we had every year through the city. And I actually did the parade in my own costume as a clown. I have no idea how you got that info.
We have our sources.
So what was your question?
Yeah. Yeah. See, that was a great political answer there, because we asked a question and then he reframed it, and now I don't even know. I'm going to go back and read it. You've worn a lot of hats, including being a clown, as you've now ascertained. How on earth did you end up as a trainer?
Good question. Good question. Well, I suppose
He wasn't very good at juggling.
No, I couldn't
No.
get in juggling. I was very good at smiling as a clown, so that got me through the parade. But yeah, I began my career as a teacher, a primary school teacher. And I was a good primary school teacher, or elementary teacher, as you say in the USA. And I did that for about 10 years. But I really didn't want to stay in teaching. For me, there wasn't enough diversity. I'd always had my heart set on working in the creative industry, really in the film industry, where I could create a story or be part of that creative process. And so theme parks for me, it kind of just fell into place that theme parks was a place where I actually could have a contribution that was related to people and related to the environment and getting people ready to deliver a great experience and tell a great story. So I actually moved from teaching to theme parks and began on a carousel. And I said to my wife at the time, I said to her, look, I'm going to work during the school holidays, and then that school holidays extended to 6 months and leave from teaching. And I said, look, if it doesn't work after 6 months and I don't get, a role that's permanent and, satisfactory with my skills, then I'll go back to teaching. Well, within 6 months, I was actually elevated to a park trainer role within Warner Brothers Movie World. And so I went from the carousel to trainer, and it went from there.
That's amazing. It's funny because I mean, if you always had to fall back to a trade, you could always fall back to clowning, right? Like,
I thought you were going to say teaching.
I know. That's why.
Well, you could teach clowning, I guess. On that note, I will try to get us back on track as much as I can after that. But Shaun, you've been able to experience a lot of things in your career in the industry, but something that I remember and I think has been like a beacon within the industry is your time at Ferrari World on the opening team. Like, you're able to build a culture from nothing, just from scratch. Can you walk us through how can someone do that when there's nothing to start with?
I think that has been for me the biggest blessing for my success and my understanding of how culture can be created. Because with a new project, you've got nothing that's taken place before you. There's a blank canvas. So on that blank canvas for a new organization that wants to be world class, they only have to imagine where they want to be and what they want to be. And once they've imagined that, you can start to put the building blocks together to actually get there. And it's so much easier to achieve a culture in that situation where you've got a blank canvas than going to an organization that already has an established culture. And it might not be a perfect culture, but you have to undo a lot of it to actually head it in the right direction. And that is really hard work to change the culture that's already been established. But for us at Ferrari World, it was a dream because there was no culture that been established. So every single employee that came on, we were able to tell the story of the culture that we wanted to create. And we were able to together imagine and set the story and set the tone and set the policies that helped us to create that culture that we wanted. So in so many ways, we were so lucky to have the ability to imagine it, a culture and a world-class vision, and build it step by step. It was such an easier process. And we were so lucky. We went to 32 different countries to get employees because we didn't want Ferrari World to just be filled with one cultural group. We wanted it to be filled with the diversity of the world so that everyone, no matter where you came from in the world, you were welcomed. And we wanted our staff to represent everyone else. And there were so many initiatives that we took and we strategically made to ensure that we got that vision that we wanted to achieve world-class status, to achieve world-class delivery, and to have an engaged workforce that just was so passionate about Ferrari and lived the experience and shared it with the guests. And we achieved that, and we're very lucky. But it was achieved because we were strategic.
It takes a very special person to be able to turn around and say, there was no culture, so that was easy. And then secondarily, we went to 32 countries in the world and brought in people from all over the world and then made a culture out of that. And that was easier. Like, I understand what you're saying. Entrenched cultures are hard to deal with, but you had to build a culture from scratch with a very, very unique set of people. And to decide to say, this is who we are as a set of people, that's no small task. And I mean, you're very humble about how you talk about that, but that is an incredible thing to accomplish.
Look, I think if we really break down what we did there, all of the leadership team that came on board, and this is exactly how culture is created. When you read about how to create it, is we pulled
Yeah.
all the leadership into the room and we said, we imagined what we wanted. And we debated and we shared so many ideas and we spent so much time in the war room, as it is, just creating and naming that culture and describing it until we were all on board and we all spoke the same language about what that culture should be. And then we went about and strategically started to do it within each of our departments. And we kept coming back as a leadership team to say, how are we going? How are we getting each of our individual teams towards that goal? So we were very strategic about that collective, everyone being on board and everyone speaking the same language. And we were focused. We were so focused on that. And the induction process, as new employees came on board, first of all, it was, a group of 30, and then it was a group of 60. And then every week we had 30 new people join the group. We shared the vision we wanted, and we had them in our palm of our hand because everyone was excited by it. And because they were excited, they owned the vision and they wanted to get there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I'm fascinated by culture. It's one of the things that's like a pet hobby almost now, reading culture books and thinking about culture and how can you make it better. And there's no end to it. As you look at what you just said about being very deliberate, there's kind of an old maxim. I certainly didn't come up with it, but which is every business has a culture. It's what, if you set it or if it set itself, it's gonna exist. And the only way you have a positive culture is to be incredibly deliberate and consistent, because culture has a tendency of atrophy or of degrading over time if you're not consistent with it.
Yeah.
Interesting. I love it.
And John, I just wanted to say that we named that culture, and that culture that we named we wanted it to be a culture that was out of this world. We wanted it to be described as a safety culture and wanted it to be described as a culture of recognition and a culture of feedback. There were so many aspects to that culture that we wanted people to be able to name and see and feel. So it wasn't just one aspect. It was quite a large, you could describe it in so many ways, depending on where you were and what you were feeling at the different times of within the organization.
That's amazing. But intentional, very, very intentional.
You touched on all the different countries that you recruited from, and I'm fortunate to come from Maurice, right, where they also recruit from those countries. And there's something really special when you get so many different viewpoints together, and they engage in a way. And I personally don't think that I would be the person I am today had I not been exposed to all of that culture over the years. It's cool that you could build a culture for the new operation with this diverse group of people and then take it to such a variety of levels to be able to have it touch every aspect, of the operation and have people use it in that fashion. But I'm going to move us on because usually John or I, one of us gets us off in some rabbit hole somewhere. We're trying to develop these cultures within these attractions and tours. We have service quality and guest experience and all these things that we're moving towards. But our employees are only there for 3 or 6 months in some cases. The year-round operations, it's nice because you have that consistency and you can build on it. But when you're starting from near scratch every year with a new group of recruits, right? What are fundamental mistakes that organizations take where they kind of go off the rails, right? And culture slips.
Yeah. Look, and I think you hinted at the mistake by describing the situation. And the situation being for so many organizations is that they see their new employees as only being there for 6 months, only being there short term. So the first thing that comes into the organization's mind is, well, why invest in them in a big way? Why give them the same training? Why give them the same timing for the induction program when they're only going to be here for 6 months and they're not really going to give much, or we're not going to get much back from them. So that situation creates a whole lot of decisions that can impact negatively what you're trying to achieve, which is a really strong culture that has impact on your business performance and impact on the guest experience. Look, if an employee's coming for 1 week or 2 years or for long term, it doesn't matter. They should all receive the same induction process and the same amount of time and the same amount of startup support that they need to get on board, to understand and to be ambassadors for your organization. I think the aim for any induction program, for any organization, is that people are welcomed into the organization and are welcomed in such a way that they understand the organization, they understand where it's going, what it's about, and that they walk out of that induction process motivated and in love with the company. And I say that in love bit because if your employees are not in love with your company, they don't speak with the words that we would describe the person that we're in love with. You know, they don't talk to their friends and their family about their workplace positively. They don't refer their friends to the workplace. So our employees have to feel like they're in love with the company, and we have to build that. They have to be proud of their company. So we have to build initiatives that help them to be proud of their company. Give them things to talk about that make them feel proud. Give them things that they are proud to deliver to their family and friends, which might be tickets to the park, and they can be proud to share those tickets or those incentives or those offers. You know, we've got to be very strategic about making sure that if an employee is here for only 6 months, that we welcome them just as any other employee, and we give them the same startup so that they're in love with our company, they can be ambassadors for our company, and they can invest in our company. And by that, I mean, when a guest is shouting at them or angry and in their face, they are so invested in the company that they defend the company, or that they speak positively for the company, or that they bend over backwards for the company to ensure that the guest is treated right. So people don't give that effort unless they're in love with the company.
I pulled off my shelf here while you were talking, but it reminds me very much of this book. Oh, hold on. Can I get this on the screen? Disney U. And the story of how Disney went about building a radical culture of engaged, loyal, they say customer-centric employees. Everyone goes through Disney U and they label everything down to, you're a staff member, right? Like, you're not a staff member, you're part of the show, right? Like you might be backstage, but you're part of the show. And there's like this whole kind of idea behind it. And what you said is very much along that same line of getting people radically engaged and ownership of it themselves. It's just an interesting theme that continues throughout. And I think I certainly see a gap there in most organizations on those kinds of feelings, right? Like, there's not a lot of effort being put in. And so I guess my question for you to follow on from Tim is to say, when you're talking to ownership of some of these facilities that you work with, they're probably coming and saying, well, show us the ROI. Like, what's the ROI of this? How would you characterize that? Like, how do you approach that for people?
Yeah, and look, that is a very valid point. Shows the ROI and the return on investment for giving hours to staff to do an induction, giving hours to staff to do training and coaching on service delivery. It's there. It's there in the numbers. But the numbers, they're only useful to you if you're actually measuring. For example, let's just talk about service. If we're measuring service before we implement an initiative, and then we measure service after the initiative has been implemented, and that measure might be, a dollar figure on sales, on upsells, or it might be a dollar figure on overall sales within an outlet or a department, or it might be retention. And retention is a really good return on investment number to look at, because it costs for people to keep moving on. It costs a lot of money for us to replace people and retrain people. But the longer we keep them, the cheaper it is because we're not re-employing, we're not retraining, but we're also developing highly skilled and highly engaged, and we're developing people that are a lot more effective the longer they stay with us,
Right.
the longer they're engaged with us. So that is a huge return on investment example of why it is so valuable to engage people and put the right amount of time and training into them, and to have all the initiatives to retain our employees so that they're proud of the workplace, they're
Right.
engaged in the workplace, and they want to stay in the workplace. So they're really good examples. And look, that book that you just referenced there would reference the importance of engagement by design, service
Mm-hmm.
by design. So when it comes to
Yep.
service, as Tim asked before, that company that doesn't invest a lot of money or a lot of time into people, well, they're going to be the ones that invest just 1 hour in the new employees in service training, right? What impact can 1 hour of training have on someone to deliver good service? Probably nothing. But
Yep.
you look at a company that's doing really well in our industry, they've got service programs that develop skills, develop knowledge, and develop
Yep.
commitment from employees. So that time and effort that's put into that employee to deliver great service and understand all the systems that help them deliver service is going to create a better outcome, because we're going to create more money, repeat visitors, and we're going to sell a lot more product and have a lot more of a better experience for guests. And that is the return on investment of, all that time, training, and coaching. That's by design. By design, we're
Yeah.
going to have
Yeah.
better outcomes.
I think everyone would agree. The more time you can spend building a culture and nurturing the culture and supporting it, the better it is. But the business reality of our industry, and especially seasonal operators within the industry, is that time is compressed, right? So how can you effectively build a culture program knowing that there's basically limited resources, right? There's only so much time that you can pull and set aside to build it, but you want to do it as effectively as possible.
And that is by design, coming up with that. You have to roadmap what their employee journey will look like if they're only here for 6 months, for example. And so you roadmap that by actually looking at, the amount of time they're spending in induction, and then what does that look like in terms of their on-the-job training, and then what does that look like in regards to being effective, because we want to really upskill them really quickly, and we want to have them engaged and ambassadors for our organization really quickly as well. So it's about strategically looking at what does their journey look like, that 6-month journey. First of all, what they need to do their job well, and then what do they need to exemplify and be ambassadors for our organization. And you have to sprinkle that over the top. And that might mean that every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks of their journey, there's some sort of strategic initiative that brings them back to either celebrate or acknowledge, where they've come from, what they've achieved, and thank them for that. And it might be a motivation event. It might be an opportunity to just gather and do some sort of team event together, a celebration of what they've achieved so far. Or, you have to look at their journey, how long they're with us, and strategically plan it out by design. And it can happen, and it can be done with whatever budget you've got. It doesn't matter what budget. Disney's going to have a big budget. They've got, access to large budgets. So things are going to look different. But in a small organization, we could still achieve the same outcomes with a small budget, but we do it in different ways. And it's, it's how we touch the employees, how we are effective with our employees, how we speak to our employees, how we recognize our employees with our words and our presence. That's not money.
I mean, you often say that organizations succeed when they treat the employees as if they're true stakeholders. And then, of course, from that perspective, the philosophy is that time doesn't really matter how long they're there, if they're there for 6 weeks or they're there for 6 years. And I guess practically, well, and I think you answered the question, is really like you're just layering in what they need for the time period that they're there, and giving them the sense that they know the job that they're doing, they know what the expectations are, and then extend that out into and why it's meaningful to them. Like there's an old sales axiom that says, don't sell them what you want to sell them, right? Sell them what they're interested in buying, right? Or what meets their pain, what they're buying. I don't know if there is even a question here. I feel like we've answered it. This was my question, and I realized we could have answered it. Well, maybe we just move on.
John, I know what you're saying. You really touched on the fact that how do we get our employees to be real partners in the business and feel like they're part owners, right? And that is really, really an important point that we have, in engaging employees in the workplace, we have to start aiming towards that. And I'll give you a really good example of how that impact can be seen. At Warner Brothers Movie World, many years ago, when I first worked there, we had food and beverage employees, and they'd go into their outlet and they would do their job. They'd sell the food, clean up their outlet, and close the till, the cash box, and hand it over. That was the end of their day. That process would happen every day in every food and beverage outlet. And the employees really didn't know how much money their outlet made. They didn't know what their individual sales output was. Okay.
Right.
We turned that around a little bit and as an experiment, and we said to that outlet, okay, you're now in charge of this outlet's profits. Everything that your team does in this outlet, you'll see all the results. So by sharing the results with that team and making them responsible for their profits in their outlet, it was the bakery, the employees started to notice that when they made an extraordinary effort and said, with this pie, would you like sauce? They could see that the sauce sales would go up. And the sauce sale might have been an extra 50 cents, would you like a sauce with that? And every time they said that, they saw the 50 cents go up. And so the manager of the outlet said, hey, everyone, let's all say, would you like sauce with that today? And by doing that, this outlet started to learn that, wow, if we all said the same thing or we all added something on to the sale consistently, our sales go up. And that's what they saw. That performance of that individual outlet, once they had ownership for it, increased remarkably because they had ownership and they could see the results. We started to make them business partners, and we recognized that. And that made a huge difference.
That's really fascinating because, tourism attractions is a great example, and it happens in other industries as well. But of course, but it's pretty full on. Like you are working very, very long hours, very long days for sometimes very brief period of time during the seasonal aspect of it. And you were full on, and it is very easy to kind of devolve into negativity of why is management making these decisions? Why is this? What you just said is a really interesting way of getting people to own something themselves and to take personal pride in the fact that, hey, they figured out that they can upsell sauce. And I bet you that wasn't the only thing they figured out.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that you come into every facility and it's like, oh, we have a great culture. It's awesome. Very often you come in and people are like, who are you? So how do you address that? Where do you start?
There are so many organizations you go into and it's just like that. And look, it can't be about me. And it's about the organization coming to the realization of what matters and what makes an impact. And sometimes it's as simple as the things that the managers are or are not doing. And you can see it as a consultant or as an individual that goes into an organization for a short time. And you can see that if the leaders are being present in the workplace, and if they walk through their park or their facility, their entertainment center each day, they can see even the way they walk through their entertainment center by the way that that leader interacts with the team members on the way, if they actually are engaged and if they are respected by their team, by the way in which they're saying hello or they're asking questions or people actually turn their back on them and look like they're hard work. You can see the impact that has or doesn't have. And that's the starting point. It can't be about me going in and making all the changes. I can't do that. But what I can do is I can highlight for businesses those important points that maybe they can't see, the things that they're doing, not doing, that actually make an impact on their team members. And their team members need to feel supported. They need to feel part of the team. They need to feel informed. And so even a simple thing like being informed can be an initiative like, well, let's gather our team in the morning before we start work. Let's spend 15 minutes extra time before we start, keeping everyone in the loop. Okay. And then hold our leadership responsible by actually say, let's teach our leaders how to conduct that morning session effectively. Not just, okay, everyone, this is what's happening today, but let's talk about a focus for the day. Let's talk about what we did yesterday really well. Let's talk about what we're expecting today. Let's have a template of the things that could and should or possibly might impact the impact of that communication session. So we've got to train our leaders in all the different aspects on how they can be effective. That's what I can offer, is that I can't do it for them.
Yep. That makes perfect sense.
Shaun, you touched on leaders and really the impact that they can have within a culture. I want to go one step up from that because what I have noticed is organizations that have really great cultures, HR has a seat at the table with the executive team, right? It's not this thing that sits off to the side. Like they're up there, they're involved in the decisions, and it goes all the way down. So I think that lends to what you're talking about. Like you're building a culture, you just can't build it at the frontline level, right?
Yeah.
It has to go all the way through. But under that, guys, right? What's the biggest misconception that leaders make about culture?
The biggest misconception. I think the biggest misconception is the fact that the culture can't be changed or can't be formed. They just don't do anything to impact culture because they feel it's either too hard to change or that it is the way it is. And I don't agree with that. I really feel that no matter where a culture of an organization is at any time, that it can be formed, it can be impacted, and it can be changed with strategic effort of the leadership team and getting on board the rest of the employees with the organization. And in many situations, organizations do need to identify and name what culture they have and possibly how it can be shifted. That's really, really important. But to be content with it and to do nothing or to think that we can't change it, that's just bad leadership.
Yeah. Well, doing nothing is actually doing something, right? Like it's the cost of inaction on the culture, right?
Absolutely.
So you've made a conscious decision not to do anything. The culture is going to evolve whether you're leading it or not in some aspect.
Yes.
Leaders will approach it in different ways. So I've been doing this for a while in my own culture and in other cultures that I've worked in over my lifespan, where you have this situation, we're going to try and cater to keeping everyone happy, right? We're going to listen to employee surveys, we're going to try and keep everyone happy. And you realize pretty quickly that there's no way to keep everyone happy. You have to keep everyone engaged, or at least that's what it feels like. What would you say to that statement?
Yeah, I'm keeping everyone happy. If that's the attitude of the leaders, then I wouldn't like to be there because I don't think it could ever work. We're never going to be able to keep everyone happy. In every organization, no matter what type of culture exists, there's going to be people that are not going to possibly fit in that culture because we've made the wrong mistake or they've made the wrong mistake about whether they belong in that organization. And so there is a role for organizations to identify who doesn't fit in this culture and move them on, or to say for employees, hopefully to say, actually, this is not the culture that I'm going to feel most productive in. And we want them to step out, to identify themselves and to move on. So an effective probation period is really about identifying if an employee the employee that we've chosen through the recruitment process is right for our business and is right for our culture. And if leaders are not and supervisors are not using that probation period well, and giving feedback and identifying and coaching, and that employee also giving feedback about whether they fit and they've made the right decision to join your organization. If that we're not using that probation period well, then we're not helping the culture of our organization, because potentially we're letting people into our organization that don't fit our culture and that can negatively impact our culture. That probation period is critical for us to move people on or affirm, yeah, you're the right fit, and you feel you're the right fit. Let's continue to have that relationship.
I actually have a question that I'm really curious about, Shaun, how you would approach this. You have someone who's not a fit in the organization, right? That you've identified them as detrimental to the culture, right? But they're a high performer, right? Like they service the guests well, they do everything that you need. What do you do?
Okay. Look, if it was in their probation period, I would utilize that probation period and check to see that they want to continue. And either we move them on or we develop a plan for them to actually be up. We have to be upfront with that employee and talk about where the culture fit is not right. We have to be really honest with that. We have to be honest with that employee, even if they've been a long-term employee, they're a great employee, but they're impacting negatively on our culture. We have to be upfront with them. We have to sit down and we have to be open and honest, and we have to talk about what impact they're making. And ultimately, over time, if, through that two-way conversation, if they're not willing to come on board with our culture, I think that we should move them on. And they should be part of that process, knowing that that's the decision where we're heading as well. Because ultimately, they're going to be impacting others around them, and that's not fair. That's not them to actually impact others around them. Look, if they're performing great and they're doing a great job and they're not impacting others, then I don't think that matters. They should be able to stay. But if they're impacting others, that's where we have to be upfront and honest and work with them and give them a chance, give them a support. But if they're not willing to change with that impact, then we got to move them on.
Yeah, and I would suspect this happens at most organizations and most attractions at times. Like someone just isn't in a fit. And we've talked a lot about building culture, but this is almost like the nurturing part.
Yeah,
right?
and look, use that example of you've got a piece of bad fruit in a bowl, and if you don't take it out, it's going to impact all the other fruit, right?
Yep.
And we have a responsibility, and so many organizations where the culture is bad, or we have an ineffective leadership team or an ineffective HR team or whatever, they're doing that. They're not being open, honest, and upfront and challenging individuals where improvement is required. And so that's an area for improvement, is having more impactful, more stronger leaders that know what their responsibilities are, their roles, and they have the skills and the confidence and competence to be able to deliver those hard conversations. So that's a skill that we have to develop within our leaders.
100%. I feel a little bit like I'm sitting at the feet of a supreme leader of how understanding all this. This is really great. I'm really enjoying this. I'm like, I'm going to learn so much. It's great. And I know that's like the most insulting thing you can say to Australian is to compliment them. So I apologize. I have a very Australian friend and he always yells at me whenever I give him compliments. But I'll say this. So a lot of attractions, especially in the mid-market, are families. They're family attractions. They've been around for 60, 80, 90 years. And, it's their brothers and sisters and cousins, and it's all in the family, that kind of thing. Yet you have a marketing person or you have someone who is just wildly toxic or massively underperforming. What on earth do you suggest to leaders in those organizations to say, here's how you get better?
And that is very much a reality that so many attractions face, is that they are family developed, and they're filled with many family members and a long history of owning and operating their own business and making their own decisions as a family. And then you have all of a sudden one of the family members might not be performing well, but their family, so no one says anything. And It's a very difficult situation. But if the business leadership is fair income, we say in Australia, is, you know, real about being impactful and getting the best out of their business and their employees, then they need to be open and honest to others, talking about areas for improvement and people that possibly need extra training, extra support, or need some coaching in whatever area it is. And I think the fact that it's a family business, that is an obstacle for everyone else in the business that's not family to actually feel that they can't say something. And so they don't say something. But in this situation, in these family businesses, they need to really share and communicate the importance of transparency and empower everyone else in the business to highlight how we can improve and that we need to know. Don't just view us as family. They need to make that point, because everyone else in the business that's not family, we put that barrier up. We think we can't say something. We shouldn't say something, or else the family's going to, all get together and then, be against us. I think that's just a natural thing that happens in our minds. But look, if we do say something about that and the business does gang up against us because they're family, it's not the right business for us to be working in, because that business is so family focused that it is detrimental to its success. So we do have to ascertain if a family business is that way or not. That is a reality. It's not an easy answer, but it's something we do have to ascertain.
I mean, I almost feel like at this point in time, to a certain extent, I wanted to set you free to start answering questions that we haven't asked, Shaun. But we'll keep asking questions to keep the conversation moving. But if you suddenly go, I have this thing I want to drop on you.
I mean, I feel like we're getting so much insight. Like I'm very much with you, John. I've heard Shaun speak before at things, but I feel like we've really gotten to dig into some things that we haven't made it through, like half of the stuff we were going to ask you. So, so that's part of it. But just to kind of riff off, the family situation, I think that it's not limited to family orgs, right? You have these larger orgs, and lots of times departments become families, and you could have a family member, right, within that department that it is toxic, and you kind of have to do the same thing with it, but you don't want to because you feel like they're family.
The relationships we have are really a challenge, actually, within an organization, because we all start out most likely within an attraction at the front line, right? And we move up, we become the supervisor, and then we become or team leader, and then the supervisor, and then the manager. And moving from, as a team member, we're trying to fit into the team. We're trying to make sure that everyone respects us and we fit in and everyone likes us. And then the moment we become a team member, we do have to start to, sometimes deliver harder, firmer, more direct messages. And so separating ourselves from those friendships and that teamwork and being able to deliver a more firm, direct message is really challenging at first. I remember when I made that quick transition from teaching to the theme park industry. Well, I was a teacher, so I was older than everyone else. And when I first joined on the carousel at Warner Brothers Movie World, I didn't have to fit into the team. I didn't have to worry about the relationships and being everyone's friend. I was very focused on just doing my job and showing the skills and passion I had for what I wanted to achieve within the industry. So for me, my catapult through the industry or becoming a trainer and a manager was quite fast, because I already had a lot of those skills. So I didn't have to worry about fitting in with everyone. So that for me that helped me with my quick transition into the industry, because I already had lots of skills that were transferable.
With what we've spoken about already in the various areas of here's the problem definitions, how do you start the process of solving it? Obviously, you have to have a team that's willing to say, we have a problem and we need some help. What's your process? How do you go after solving some of these things?
Look, that is a really interesting question, because obviously every person or every leader or every manager or every supervisor doesn't have all the answers, and sometimes problems that come to us, it's the first time that we've ever encountered that problem. It makes so much sense for us to be able to have that opportunity to identify what the problem is and open it up to everyone's opinion. So having said that, because that's like a brainstorming session of how we sort everything out, that would logistically make sense as how we start sorting out problems, is identifying all the different routes and ways that we could help solve it. And I want to reference one of the things we did at the park at Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi. What we did there is, because we wanted everyone to be owners in the business and we wanted everyone to be problem solvers in the business. So we actually implemented the old suggestion box, which just if I say the suggestion box like that for an employee, everyone just goes, oh, yeah, I know what that is, and that doesn't work. It doesn't work if we just have the suggestion box where people put their suggestions in, and then those suggestions stay in there for years and never get looked at and never get answered. And that's just a token thing. But at Ferrari World Abu Dhabi, we wanted a process that actually worked to solve problems. So what we did there is we had the suggestion box, but we had a training program that we strategically, by design, developed. And that program was about, let's create how to be a business owner, how to be partners in this business. And so we created a process where all employees could think like the owners of the business. And they identified for every problem in the business, this is what we want you to think about. We templated the process. We want you to think about the outcome, the cost, the timing, the resources, the viability, all of those sorts of things that a business owner would think of to solve a problem and to see if something's workable or not. Employees then templated and wrote down their approach to solving problems in the business. And then when they saw a health and safety issue, they identified the issue. They then said how it could be solved, and they thought like a business owner. Then they put that idea into a suggestion box. We then had a process that was by design to actually take that box every month, every week, and actually document all of the suggestions that have been put in there, all the problems and all the suggestions. And then every month we had representatives from across the whole organization that would meet and look at every single problem that was in there and suggestion on how to answer it. And then we had a team of people that actually looked at the viability of the responses that were there and actually responded to employees. So every employee that put something in got a personal response. We thank you for your suggestion about solving this problem. This is what the committee first thought about it. And they put all the responses. Now, those responses that were actually implemented and solved, the employee actually got 12 months, the first 12 months of the value of that problem being solved back in their pay. So if it was a health and safety issue that was being solved and it actually had added value to the business, it saved on our insurance or saved on back issues or whatever it is, then the employee got that in their pay packet extra for the year. Here's the best bit about it is we had miles and miles of tunnels under Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi, employee tunnels that we could walk under. And what we did is we used those walls and we put up the suggestions that were implemented and we put the name of the employee and then we put how much money they were getting every month for implementing that suggestion. So employees could see how every suggestion was being acknowledged, responded to, and the impact it was making financially and how that was also coming into their colleagues' pockets. That was problem solving 101 at Ferrari World. And it was so effective.
Yeah, that's a scorecard, right? Like that gives people an opportunity to be a little competitive, but also to be a part of the equation. You have a big focus on safety culture and really trying to think about how to have a safe culture for the people involved. That's, given present political climes of which we are not going to speak at all, that is a loaded phrase. And I'm curious how you define that.
Look, I think a safety culture is very much where every employee that's part of the business feels that it's their responsibility to look after safety, keep an eye on safety, and to take safety seriously for both the guests that come to the business, but also for their colleagues and themselves. So that's the three elements: the guests, their colleagues, and themselves. And so often a safety culture can only focus on the guests. Sometimes it can only focus on, keeping their colleagues safe, but it's about keeping them safe as well. That trinity when it comes to safety is so important, and everyone taking ownership for it and feeling it's their responsibility. Obviously, there needs to be structures to make that happen, and it needs to keep on being reinforced. But ultimately, that's what safety culture is everyone feeling that this is a safe place because we're all part of the process.
During that time that we don't speak of, the COVID, you urged leaders to over communicate things that were going on. What do you think that taught us as an industry about the resilience of culture in general, especially being that there was a disconnect for a period of time?
Yeah, and there was a huge disconnect for a period of time, but I think COVID taught us that time that we can't speak about, that it really highlighted for us those organizations that that care a lot and have a culture that cares for their employees, because they kept their employees connected, and they continue to communicate with them and keep them informed. And they might not have had the finances to keep paying them, but they still made a commitment to them, and that really came out in COVID. And for those companies that didn't have a strong culture, and then COVID hit, I think they certainly learned a lot about the importance of keeping an engaged workforce, because it was so much harder for them to restart and pull people back.
I think that was a lesson for the industry in general. Like, it was a lesson for everyone about resilience and kind of service and lots of different aspects. It completely changed guest experience, right? Like, technology was adopted at a huge rate. But I tend to think about, I think you call it the spirit of an organization, right? Like, where culture seeps into the guest, right? I think that we can tell when something's authentic as humans, right? And we know when something's manufactured. Organizations like Disney have done a really good job of that authenticity, even though we know it's all like it's storytelling, but because the culture is so strong, they've been able to develop that authenticity. What recommendations could you give to operators to keep consistency within the culture, keep the authenticity? And, are there any examples from organizations that you've helped or come across in your travels?
Yeah, look, I think to be authentic and to really deliver an experience that really connects with the guests, I think it's really important that we start with our leadership and our supervisor levels, and we give them the skills to be able to impact their team members authentically. And by that, an example might be when it comes to speaking with their employees and recognizing their employees and acknowledging the good things that they do. That's such an important thing that needs to happen every day, because if it's not happening, then our employees just do what they believe that they should be doing. And sometimes that comes across as inauthentic. Whereas an example of that is when the supervisor says, "Hey, everyone, thank you for all your good work today." And all the employees walk out of the green room and they go, "Well, we got praised, we got thanked," but they don't really know why they got thanked. And so that's a really good example of ineffective leadership and supervision, because they're actually trying to be nice, but they're not being effective. But the supervisors actually say, "Hey, John, the way in which you recognize that difficult guest at lunchtime with your eye contact and an open demeanor, it really made an impact on the guests. The guests felt as though you really were listening to them and that you cared for them. You created a repeat visitor in that guest. Thank you for doing that." And so by teaching our leadership and supervisors that sort of effective feedback and recognition is so much better than that, "Hey, everyone, great job today." Because what the supervisor and leader is doing is they're recognizing the small behaviors that we want to be repeated with our guests. And those behaviors are the things that help
Right.
the guest experience. And so it's all about the leaders and the supervisors and their skilling them and empowering them with the right effective things to do with their team so that our team are really impacting the guest experience. And it's about recognizing the small behaviors we want repeated each.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Dale Carnegie, How to Make Friends and Influence People. Like that idea of, that you don't ever give someone a compliment that's like, good job. You always be like very specific about what you're complimenting them about for that same reason. And that idea of smile and say their name, it's the most influential word in their life. And, those kinds of things. I think it's fascinating to see how those things have been kind of universal truths that carry forward and are so useful inside organizations. And are probably not unforced or at least underlined enough. We need to be reminded on a regular basis. I appreciate that.
And we say so often, we hear how, make the workplace fun. And there is a truth to that.
Right.
It's not that we have to be doing fun things, but it's about just, when we come together for that morning briefing, being open with each other as a team and being really present. That's what makes it fun. Or being strategic about doing a team building activity in that, that morning briefing, and then setting everyone up in the team to actually go out with a happy attitude back to the guests for the day. That's about making the workplace fun. And it's about working with our human resource department to actually have, by design, engagement program where we're inviting people back to celebrations that are fun and engaging. We can celebrate as a team and our achievements. And by design, that's making the workplace fun. It's being creative in the workplace and at the right time, just being authentic,
Yeah, totally. I'll say it this way. You are both a very engaging and fun individual to interview and also a very hard interview. And I'll tell you why. I'm watching Tim and I'm watching myself on a camera occasionally, and I'm seeing us pause, look up to the right as we're processing what you're saying and going, oh, I need to think about that a little bit. And so I'm having this great opportunity to learn at the same time as to kind of think about, well, how would I apply that inside of like how we work with our own teams? And it's just fascinating to listen to. We're going to transition to what we call the lightning round, which is a terrible misnaming of what it actually is. And what I'm going to tell you, just to take away any of the pressure and stress, is Tim and I ruin the lightning round every single time by talking too much, because the purpose of the lightning round is simply to ask questions and get quick answers. But it's never our visitor that is the problem. It is always us. So we're going to kick off the lightning round, and then you're going to watch the spectacular failure. Although we're going to be optimistic that this time's the time we're going to get it right.
It's the only thing we do consistently.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Best attraction you've ever visited purely for fun?
Universal Studios in Japan. Wow, the parade is so engaging. The best.
That's cool. I haven't checked that one out yet. I'm looking forward to it.
Higher for attitude or skills?
Attitude, definitely, because we can teach skills, we can teach basics, we can coach, but we can't teach attitude.
Most overrated training exercise?
Most overrated training exercise is the marketing department saying, bring everyone back into the training room for an hour and give them some guest service training.
Take them out of the place with guests and bring them somewhere there's none.
Yeah.
I never did that. I was a marketer. I never did that. Biggest hiring mistake you see?
Employing people at the front line that don't naturally smile in the interview. Or other big faux pas in the recruitment process is having people at the front line that they're employing for and just looking at their CV. Their CV's got nothing to do with, their presence and how well they're going to do in the workplace.
Training seasonal staff, essential or nice to have?
Seasonal staff, I think it's a nice to have because then they're aware of how other departments work and they're aware of other products, and they're going to be better ambassador if they are cross-trained, but not essential, not essential.
Best way to keep seasonal workers returning year after year?
Just care for the employees and make it
Money?
engage
No.
workplace. Look, I think we have to be real, and money is important, right? It's got to be fair, okay? And so long as we're being fair with the money, that is a given, right? We shouldn't, but it shouldn't be the only reason. The extra icing on the cake is going to be whether they've had a good time and whether they, are proud of the workplace and enjoy the workplace. That's really, really important. They have to be engaged in the workplace.
Most underutilized tool for building culture.
Ooh. The employee engagement survey or spot surveys, either or, is underutilized in that it's only done and the results are looked at. But in an effective organization, they do it, then they analyze it, then they hold every department responsible for saying what initiatives they're going to implement to impact the results on the next one and holding them accountable to that process.
Best way to recognize employees?
By being very strategic and personal with our words, and by using their name and being very specific and just making it really personal. And the fact that I appreciated what they've done and saying that and looking them in the eye, that's so important. And I say that with a tone that's low because it's about being personal.
One leadership quality every future leader should have.
Gee, that's a really, really tough one. I want them to have so many. I think that the ability to recognize well, and that's not just to recognize what people are doing well, but recognizing what they're not doing well and recognizing the gaps in their performance and being able to have the confidence and the capability to actually communicate that in their recognition with the employee, because that is that's what's going to help that process of continual improvement and helping the employee to do better and feel better about what they do and the contribution they make to the business.
We didn't do too bad. We didn't do too bad on Lightning. This is the best we've done.
Yeah, it's
well
true.
Done. 10 points to you.
I think we need to name it something other than Lightning, because I don't think that was
Gary
Lightning.
can confirm one way or the other, but I think that's the best we've done. So.
Yeah. So you built a career on helping people deliver, these magical experiences. And there are a lot of operators. I hope there's a lot of operators listening right now. But for those operators who are listening right now, who are either thinking about culture and things that they can change now in year-round operations, or those in seasonal operations that are thinking about how can we implement change next year? What's the one thing that they should start doing next week or tomorrow to affect change?
One thing that they could do next week is just gather people in the room, their leadership team, or including representatives from, all different levels of the organization, and just ask the question about how we're doing when it comes to delivering service and the guest experience. And just to have that open workshop, a few hours or a whole day where just different parts of the organization are just being really open and honest and just capturing that snapshot and then asking the question, how can we do better? Because then that starts the process of being able to focus on something as a whole organization. No matter what part of the business we're in, we can be focused on that, and it gives us something collectively that we focus on. It will start to create a common language, identifying the common issues, and then starting to problem solve that process. And hopefully, in the end, what we've done is by going through a challenge like that, and that's collective across the whole organization, we're developing the culture of the organization, because we're starting to touch on, the issues why service isn't good, or we're starting to talk about human resource issues. We're starting to talk about leadership issues. It opens up a whole can of worms, if you like, in regards to change management and what needs to change. And that process in itself is a good process. healthy process. We can start it next week, and everyone has a view on it. Everyone can be engaged in that process, and then we can start building a plan and towards continual improvement. And Tim, I think you've heard me say this before, but if an organization does not have a detailed plan written down about how they're going to deliver service and achieve service, then service delivery is not important to them. And so many organizations don't have a detailed plan written down. They just say we aim for it. That's something they can start next week. And believe me, it will engage everyone at every level.
That leads into the follow-on question that I'll ask is, what qualities do you see in the next gen attraction leaders? What are they going to need most, in managing their teams, and how do you cultivate that now? And you've answered a little bit of it, but how are you looking at the next gen leaders, like the leaders of 10 years from now? How do we cultivate those? How do we cultivate those people?
Yeah, and I think that something that's been evolving is that we can't presume that our next gen leaders have the skills that we presume that they have. As an organization, what we do need to do is we need to identify what are the leadership skills that we want to see in our leaders at our organization, and every organization is different. So go through that process of identifying the skills for our organization, for our leaders, and profiling what is a good leader at our organization and being able to name that. And that helps us in that strategic planning process. And I certainly think that obviously communication and managing up is important, and managing down and managing across our colleagues, and being brand ambassadors, and what that means to be a good brand ambassador of yourself, and is very important. And looking at what it means to be a brand ambassador for our organization, and looking at having the hard conversations with our employees, and being real and being effective when it comes to recognition, and being effective when it comes to feedback, and being effective when it comes to strategically planning. And I don't think anything's changed from the past, but I think what is important is that every organization needs to identify what are the skills for its leaders at its place. Yeah.
I want to give you the opportunity to leave a final thought for leaders in our industry about culture. What would that be?
I think culture makes a difference. So take a moment to be strategic about culture, and know that by design, you can impact culture by design. And that's what we have to do.
That's awesome. I really appreciate what you do for the industry and how you've helped organizations grow their culture. Really enjoyed the time that we spent today, and I hope that everyone listening also did. So thanks for coming on, clowning around with us a little bit. But thank you once again for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
It's been fun, John. It's been fun, Tim. It's been really, really good.
You're listening to Signal.